Hello, and welcome to Stellar Strategy Gaming. Today we're going to be trying something a little new, and something we haven't really done before, which is that we're going to be looking at the new Unearthed Arcana that recently dropped, which actually brings back several old races and adds a few new ones. There's been a lot of chatter about this, so we thought we'd just take a look at it and give you our opinions as long-term D&D players. So with that in mind, Ben is going to read off the Astral Elf.
Long ago, the creators at Wizards of the Coast decided they had not milked enough money out of the elf race in D&D and decided that what this game needed was one more. Long ago, groups of elves ventured from Feywild to the astral plane to be closer to their gods. Life in the Silver Void has imbued their souls with a blah blah blah. Because nothing ages in the astral plane, astral elves from plane are thousands of years old. It gives them an unusual perspective on time. Some are prone to melancholy and others an absence of feeling. Look for creative ways to occupy themselves. And you're a humanoid, your size is medium, standard stuff. You have an ability called Astral Fire. You know one of the following cantrips: Dancing Lights, Light, Sacred Flame. And you can use Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma as your spellcasting ability. You have Dark Vision, Fey Ancestry, Keen Senses, proficiency in Perception, Radiant Soul. When you succeed on a death save, you can regain a number of hit points equal to your proficiency bonus plus your Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma modifier. And you only once between long rests. You got the Trance ability, as elves have. And you have something called Trance Proficiencies. Whenever you finish a long rest using your Trance trait, you gain 2 proficiencies, each one with a weapon or tool of your choice. Select from the equipment chapter of the player's handbook. You mystically acquire these proficiencies by drawing them from shared elven memory, and you retain them until you finish your next long rest.
So, just from hearing that, they sound pretty good, but that's not a surprise. I haven't really encountered an elf variant which is actually weak yet, in my opinion. I mean, I'd say the weakest are the Drow by far, and their magical abilities more than make up for it there. So with this, it's honestly, I've sung this tune before and I'll sing it again, which is just that we need less of this completely broken stuff and more actual balance, especially in the elves. And with this, like some of these abilities, more specifically the Radiant Soul, like I would have loved to see that on an Aasimar, for example, maybe as one of their default abilities, but we don't have that for the Aasimar right now. And so I'm honestly, it's a cool concept, but again, this feels more like a Gith or an Aasimar than it does an elf. And especially with the context that all the elven gods live in the Feywilds, why would they go to the astral plane to get closer to their gods? There's just a lot here that doesn't make sense from a lore perspective, and even from an abilities perspective. These abilities belong with other races, not with an elf.
I would actually love to see this as some sort of Aasimar half-orc variant. Well, in our video about half-elves and half-orcs, that was something I talked about, is we need more half variants, more. It doesn't make sense that there's all these different kinds of elves, but only one kind of half-elf and only one kind of half-orc. And yeah, I'm done with it. Like it kind of doesn't matter how good it is with an elf. Like we have enough of them. We don't need any more. All right, so moving on. Autognome, they're mechanical beings built by rock gnomes, usually with a particular purpose in mind. Blah, blah, blah. It bears a resemblance to its creator, and most of them are programmed to speak and understand Gnomish. Opponents' use can vary wildly, so they are a little bit customizable. That's cool. You could have an autognome that's made like a Tinker toy, and one that's actually made like something that came out of a factory. This does have some interesting possibilities as far as what your backstory could be if you're a lore nerd, which I am. Autognomes live for about 500 years like regular gnomes. You're a construct, you're small, speed is 30 feet. You are encased in thin metal or some other durable material. When you aren't wearing armor, your base armor class is 13 plus your dex modifier.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so this would be great for like a dex-based fighter or a dex-based paladin, because you don't have to deal with the heavy armor if you don't want to. You can add built for success, you can add a D4 to one attack roll, ability check, or saving throw you make, and you can do it after seeing the D20. Before the effects of the roll are resolved, you can use this trait a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. I would describe that as aggressively okay as an ability. Like adding a D4, realistically, how many ability checks or attacks do you make where 1 or 2 is going to really make the difference? Sentry's Rest. When you take a long rest, you spend at least 6 hours in an inactive, motionless state instead of sleeping. In this state, you appear inert, but you aren't unconscious. I mean, that's handy if your DM likes to spring ambushes on the party. It's sort of announcing to the DM that they need to target this character first, because that's what every DM, especially me, would do. Specialized Design, you gain two proficiencies of your two tool proficiencies of your choice. That's, again, okay, but not great. It's tool proficiencies, so it's not skill proficiencies. And True Life, if the mending spell is cast on you, you can spend a hit die, roll it, and regain a number of hit points equal to the roll plus your constitution modifier, a minimum of 1. In addition, your creator designed you to benefit from common spells that preserve life. So you have an extra way to heal. Basically, regular healing spells work on you, and you can get some life back from the mending spell. Mara?
This is, as Ben said, aggressively okay as an entire thing, which is honestly the motto of the gnomes, as it seems, which is just that very interesting lore 9 times out of 10, but their abilities just, why would I play this? Why? I mean, there's so much other better stuff out there. I mean, hell, I could just play a Warforged and I'd be, like, godlike by comparison.
I was thinking, like, I could play a Warforged, or I could play a really short, nerdy Warforged, like... I don't know. I mean, it is what it is. It's not bad. And I can see it seeing play in certain situations, especially if you're doing something in like an Eberron type setting where they're discovering industrialization. Or I know you're running a campaign that's very sort of steampunk themed, so I could see it fitting into the world, but certainly not thrilling. Okay, next up, GIF. GIF are tall, broad-shouldered folk with hippo-like features. Some have smooth skin, others have short bristles. They're noticed wherever they go. Storytelling tradition is rich among them. It's not uncommon to see them carrying their past exploits to an enraptured crowd. Having a friendly GIF nearby when a tavern brawl erupts can also be useful, for a GIF can usually more than hold their own when a pleasant revelry dissolves into fisticuffs. The GIF are split into 2 camps concerning how their name is pronounced. Half of them say it with a hard G, half of them say it with a soft G. Disagreements over the pronunciation often blossom into hard feelings, loud arguments and headbutting contests, but rarely escalate beyond that. Before I get onto this, like the whole GIF versus GIF thing on internet stuff, like I don't need that in my D&D lore. I mean, I love a dad joke as much as the next person, but like really? I mean, just really? All right. You're a humanoid, you are medium, walking speed is 30, and you have a swimming speed equal to your walking speed. I actually really appreciate that. I wish they would do that with more, not just races, but also monster races and things like that. Like, it's kind of helpful to know if a random monster can swim or not.
Yeah. And
I don't like the way the swim speed tables are worked out. It's too much. So just having them say it is great. Damage dealer, like a hippopotamus in a crystalware shop, you are naturally adept at damaging things. When you roll a 1 on a damage die for a melee attack, you can re-roll the die and use the new roll. You can do so no more than once per turn. I actually do like this ability better than I like most of the gnomes' abilities because you can do it repeatedly. It's a constant thing. It's not a once between long rests. And apart from it being good in terms of mechanical gameplay, it's also something you don't have to keep track of. Oh, did I use that ability yet? Or was that, you don't have to get into that. And you have advantage on strength-based ability checks and strength saving throws. In addition, you count as 1 size larger when determining your carrying capacity. I mean, come on, Wizards, just let people play large stuff. Like, why are we still doing this? Like, I mean, we have races like the Astral Elves that are basically alien gods next to halflings. Like, the power balance thing. I mean, I'm sorry, Wizards, but that ship has sailed, burned down, and sunk. Like, just give it up.
I still love how Goliaths are, I think it's 8 feet tall at their maximum, and they're still a small class creature, despite the fact that I think a direwolf is only like 7 feet long.
Medium, but yeah, and same thing, like a centaur is size medium, but a horse is size large. Like, it just... Alright, so GIF, what are your thoughts on the GIF, Mara?
The GIF are... honestly, get rid of the grammatical debate, and I'm happy.
Yeah.
Honestly, I would go out of my way to play one of these, especially the art they have. I forget which book it's in. I think it's Volos. There is a monster stat block for the GIF, and the art they have is a hippo holding a rifle, and I really want to play that.
Yeah.
I really want to play that at some point. And no, it's a blunderbuss, not a normal rifle, and that's really appealing to me. I don't know why, but I want to play it.
I mean, one thing I will say for this class, mechanically it's good. I think mechanically it's a pretty strong class, especially for any kind of fighter type. It's interesting that you don't get any ability score improvement out of it, but whatever. I mean, the other abilities do more than make up for it, and an advantage on strength, I kind of understand why. So yeah, I mean, it is very entertaining, especially if you're doing a more lighthearted campaign. I don't necessarily see this working out particularly well for the tone and mood of Curse of Strahd.
Yeah, it's a bit like those green elves, or green goblin... Not green goblins. The things from Acquisitions Incorporated.
The Verdan.
Yes, the Verdan. They're like very similar vibes are coming off of these, where they're cool and they're actually kind of good, but they don't work in most settings.
That's fair. Okay, so next up, so that's, so far we're 1 for 3, which for Unearthed Arcana, actually, that's not a bad number. I mean, this stuff is a kind of a throw it against the wall and see what sticks. Next up, we've got, I think this is pronounced Hadozi. People with simian features that long ago adapted to live among the tall trees of their homeworld. They are natural climbers, feet as dexterous as their hands, membranes of skin hang loosely from their arms and legs. When stretched out, these membranes enable a Hadozi to glide. They were hunted by large natural predators. To survive, they developed an instinctual sense of community. Today, the same instinct impels many Hadozi to cultivate friendships, knowing there is safety in numbers. So, you're a humanoid, medium, or small. You choose when you select the race. That's interesting. Walking speed is 30 feet, and you have a climbing speed equal to your walking speed, which could be really handy. Dexterous feat. Okay, so this one I actually had to look it up. You can take the use an object action as a bonus action. So basically, the action use an object... a lot of times you would be able to draw a sword as a free action, but if it's doing something more involved than that, like, I don't know, some sort of complicated key mechanism you have to use, you could do it as a bonus action, which I could see being handy depending on what objects you have. And then you have but I have a feeling that's not going to come up a whole lot, so I feel like that's an ability that's probably going to end up being wasted. I think it's better in theory than in practice. If you are not incapacitated or wearing heavy armor, you can extend your skin membranes and glide. When you do so, you can perform the following aerial maneuvers. When you fall, you can move up to 5 feet horizontally for every 1 foot you descend. When you take damage for a fall, you can use your reaction to reduce the fall's damage to 0. So no fall damage is great. The glide ability, once again, it's a really interesting, neat ability that will probably never come up.
Yeah, honestly, I like this, and I will say that yeah, the glide, I actually can see that being quite useful, because the number of times when I've died to fall damage is too high. And this actually, I feel like they did listen to the players a bit here, because I believe in base D&D the rule is you have to take double your total health to die instantly, and fall damage is basically the only scenario where that's an actual risk in most campaigns. So
yeah, if you're over like level 3, sure.
Yeah, well, it's still, like, for low-level players especially, it's very useful. I'm glad they added this, because especially for new players, it'll take something out for them to worry about, which is great, because I remember when I was a new player and just everything was big and scary, and I couldn't keep track of all my stats, so I died too much. The only other thing I'll add about that is that this makes me convinced that one of the creators at Wizards of the Coast's Persona is clearly a flying squirrel, though.
Fair enough. Now that you mention it, that dexterous feat ability, because one question that comes up a lot with new players is, can I do this and this on my turn? And with the dexterous feat ability, it allows the DM to kind of hand wave it and say, like, yeah, I'll allow it.
Yeah, so for a monk or for higher level campaigns, this might not be the best thing in the world, but for new players, I see them loving this. So, and with some minor tweaks, I know that there are other classes like the Tiefling that sort of level up, so if they just added something like that here, this would honestly be like a 10 out of 10 added to your next book.
Fair enough. Alright, so next up is the Plasmoid. Plasmoids are an amorphous being with no typical shape. In the presence of other folk, they often adopt a similar form, but there's little chance of mistaking a plasmoid for anything else. They consume food by osmosis the way an amoeba does, and excrete waste through tiny pores. They breathe by absorbing oxygen through another set of pores. Their limbs are strong and flexible enough to grasp and manipulate weapons and tools. They can change their color at will, don't have internal organs. They have clusters and nerves and stuff. When they sleep, they do lose their rigidity and spread out, and sometimes mistaken for a rock or some other feature of the environment. So it's interesting. They don't turn into a puddle. They just turn into a blob. So as a creature type, you're an ooze. You are medium or small. You choose your size when you gain the race. Walking speed of 30 feet. Amorphous. You can squeeze through a space as narrow as 1 inch wide, provided you are wearing and carrying nothing. You also have advantage on ability checks you make to initiate or escape a grapple. You have dark vision for 60 feet, and you can hold your breath for up to an hour, which actually could come in really handy. Natural resilience. You have resistance to acid and poison damage, and advantage on saving throws against being poisoned. And lastly, shape self. If you are not incapacitated, you can reshape your body to give yourself a head, 1 or 2 arms, 1 or 2 legs, makeshift hands and feet, or you can revert to a limbless blob. No action required, so you can just do that. And as a bonus action, you'd extrude a pseudopod. It's up to 6 inches wide and 10 feet long, or reabsorb it into your body. You can use this to manipulate an object, open an unlocked door or container, stow or retrieve an item from an open container, or pour out the contents of a container. The pseudopod can't attack, activate magic items, or carry more than 10 pounds. So what it's not specifically restricted from doing is if you're in a confrontational situation and somebody's got a sword that they haven't drawn yet, I could totally see this as you use the pseudopod to try to take their own sword away from them.
Yeah, this is honestly... I think that this is great, borderline too good, just because, especially in the right campaign, some of these abilities would break things so quickly. You can move through basically a lock in a door because of that one ability where you can squeeze through tiny spaces. I mean, there's just... This one is... And on top of that, it also cancels out the magic item, the Vorpal Sword, I want to say. Or one of them where it's... If you roll, I think it's a 20 or 19, you instantly decapitate any creature and they just die. That doesn't work on this one, because before the attack lands, you could just say, haha, I don't have a head anymore.
Yes, particularly as a monk or a rogue or a monk-rogue multi-class, this could get really broken really fast. Basically, if you don't... monk especially, if you're able to do your stuff without needing to carry weapons, like there's just no stopping you, basically. For a real high fantasy campaign, I could see this being tons of fun. The only possible downside to it, and I am nitpicking here, the only possible downside to it is that it's the kind of thing where it's so high fantasy that if you have other players playing like humans and halflings and things like that are a little bit more grounded in our reality, it could be a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
All right, and finally, we have the Thri-kreen. Thri-kreen have insectile features and 2 pairs of arms. Their bodies are encased in protective chitin. They can alter the coloration of this carapace to blend in with their natural surroundings. They don't sleep. They require periods of inactivity to revitalize themselves. During these periods, they are fully conscious and aware of what's happening around them. So again, the ambush during the long rest basically doesn't happen. They speak by clacking their mandibles and waving their antennae, indicating to other Thri-kreen what they're thinking and feeling, and as a player, you should absolutely mimic that behavior at the table every session, the entire session. The DM and the other players are definitely going to appreciate that.
Note, we are not responsible or able to be held liable for any lost friends that are resulting from this.
If you do that at a session and all you lose are friends, you're lucky. Other creatures find this method of communication difficult to interpret and impossible to duplicate. To interact with other folk, Thri-kreen rely on a form of telepathy. So there's the question of if they have telepathy, why do they bother with the clacking and waving? Why not just... Anyway, you're a monstrosity. You are medium or small. You choose the size when you select this race. 1 feet 30 feet. While you aren't wearing armor, your carapace gives you a base armor class of 13 plus your dex mod.
Again, that's really broken, in my opinion.
Yes. As an action, you can change the color of your carapace to match the color and texture of your surroundings, giving you advantage on dexterity checks made to hide in the surroundings. You have dark vision. You have secondary arms. You have 2 slightly smaller secondary arms below your primary pair of arms. The secondary arms function like your primary arms, following exceptions. You can use a secondary arm to wield a weapon that has the light property, but you can't use a secondary arm to wield other kinds of weapons. You can't wield a shield with a secondary arm. Sleepless revitalization, you do not require sleep and can choose to remain conscious during a long rest, so you must still refrain from strenuous activity to gain the benefit of the rest. You have the magical ability to commune mentally with any number of willing creatures you can see within 120 feet of you. By the way, its wording is sometimes really important. The fact that it's willing means that you wouldn't be able to use this ability to harass somebody, essentially. People can shut you out. It's one of those little distinctions that sometimes gets lost, but can come up. Contacted creature doesn't need to share a language with you, but it must be able to understand at least one language. Your telepathic link to a creature is broken if you or the creature move more than 120 feet apart, if either of you is incapacitated, or if either of you mentally breaks the contact. Now, as I recall from the lore, the Thri-kreen they're sometimes described as cannibalistic, but that's not quite right, since they're an insectoid race, and what they like to eat are elves. So, but that is something that you may or may not wish to include in your game, is the fact that it's entirely possible that one of your other party members is going to be the Thri-kreen's favorite food.
I'm imagining that scene from the new Suicide Squad movie where the shark almost eats Ratcatcher. So that's what that comes to mind. For this class, I will say that I've played a Thri-kreen before, and I actually really enjoyed it. I'm a little disappointed by the multiple arms ability here. Like, I feel like it should be much better than it is, because the value of having more than just the base 4 limbs is so high. And generally speaking, like, I might be biased here, but I wish there was more to this. It's not bad, but by comparison to everything else, it's just underwhelming.
I do generally like them as a character race. With the secondary arms, one thing that's not specified here that should be is if my character has 4 arms, how many attacks can I make?
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that, I mean, yeah. Or even just, can they get disarmed? I mean, how would heat weapon work if you're holding 4 separate daggers at the same time? Things like that.
Yeah, I mean, with heat weapon, it targets a specific item, so in that case, that's not too hard to puzzle out. There's also some questions like, would you be able to wield would you be able to dual wield great swords or great axes? Like, it doesn't really, it's just not clear. It's not bad, it's just not clear.
The other one I will mention, as sort of my final thought on this race, is that also, shouldn't they get an advantage to grappling? I mean, they've got 4 arms. I mean, and they're covered in, like, bony plates. This isn't like a human arm grabbing you where you can bite it, or you can do something like that and sort of force them to let go. This is chitinous armored limbs grabbing you and holding you. Like, I feel like you should either have an advantage to the grappling move itself, or an advantage if you're holding someone in a grapple.
Between that and the fact that there's no ability to score increase here, I'm going to go with this was probably another misguided attempt at balance. I mean, you've got a 4-armed bug that doesn't sleep, is telepathic, can blend in with its environment, and has a natural AC of 13 plus your dex modifier. There again, like, balance isn't happening here. And I would I guess this will probably be more or less my closing thought for this. As far as this content, most of it is very good. You know, the stuff I don't like isn't horrible. I just don't particularly care for it. Like, I can't objectively tell you that the Astral Elf is terrible or that the Autonome is terrible. My closing thought here, though, is I think that Wizards needs to really develop the philosophy of all in or not at all. If you're going to make an overpowered race, just do it. Just make a godlike race. And that can be a really interesting dynamic to have going on in a campaign where you've got your Thri-kreen, for example, with all these great abilities next to this normal, boring, mundane human, and in the start of the campaign, the human's not keeping up. The human's not dealing as much damage, the human is more vulnerable, but then as they level up and gain abilities, they catch up or even become better depending on the class and the feats and all that. You sort of have Robin versus the rest of the Teen Titans. Robin didn't have any superpowers, but he was arguably the strongest member of the Teen Titans because his lack of superpowers forced him to be creative.
Yes. My closing thoughts are honestly just, like, all of these have a lot of potential, but I feel none of them truly reach the level that some of the early D&D races are at. Like, the Tiefling, for example, is one of the most played races of all time, next to the Elf, to no one's surprise. And so I sort of to mimic Ben's thoughts, I want to see Wizards do a little bit better or just even a little bit more. But with that, we hope you enjoyed this little review on the newest Unearthed Arcana. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. If we get enough, we'll perhaps even do this again at some point in the future. And thank you for watching.